Also coming this spring is the exciting biography Liberty's Forgotten Hero, written by Kesha L. Grant. This is the inspiring true story of James Forten, who served in the American Revolution as a teenager, then dedicated his life to fighting for the ideals set forth by the Declaration of Independence that all men are created equal. If anyone has questions for Keisha, please drop them in the chat or in the Q&A so she can address them at the end of her presentation. And now I'll pass the mic over to Keisha herself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kesha L. Grant, and my pronouns are she and her. I am a Black woman. I have shoulder length brown locks with blonde highlights. Today, I am wearing a brown V-neck sweater and black pants. I also wear glasses with purple frames. Currently, I am sitting in an office and my background is blurred. I am so grateful to be speaking with you today about my debut picture book biography, Liberty's Forgotten Hero, The Revolutionary Life of James Forten. In addition to being a children's book author, I am also a teacher based out of Atlanta. I've been an educator for over 20 years and a writer since 2017. The book that I'm talking to you about today, Liberty's Forgotten Hero, highlights the extraordinary life of James Forten, who was an important and consequential 19th century abolitionist based in Philadelphia. Next slide. Um, Liberty's Forgotten Hero is a powerful, true story of James Forten, an entrepreneur, abolitionist, and pivotal civil rights leader. Born free in Philadelphia in 1766, James Forten witnessed the birth of the United States of America and the promise of all men are created equal. As a teenager, inspired by these ideals, he went on to fight in the American Revolution. But after the war, he realized that the new government didn't intend to uphold these promises for all people. Determined, James spent the rest of his life mending America into the nation that it promised to be. His life is an inspiring example of battling prejudice and systemic racism while championing American ideals for everyone. James spent his life and much of his fortune supporting abolitionist civil rights, and in the process, solidifying his place as one of the era's most influential leaders. Um, and the next slide is about my inspiration for writing the book. I first learned about James Forten's life about 10 years ago when I received a copy of his biography, A Gentleman of Color, by historian Julie Winch from my husband, who found it while he was on a business trip. When I first saw the cover of the book, I wasn't sure what to think because I saw the profile of James Forten and I thought, well, I don't know who this person is. And I was a little confused and curious to find out who he was. When I read the back cover of the book, I was my jaw just dropped. This was seemed like an extraordinary person that I had heard nothing about. And as an avid history fan, I was shocked that somebody of his stature had existed, and I knew nothing about him, had never learned about him in school. So I read the book from cover to cover and just was fascinated. Like his life had all the markings of a major Hollywood movie. His father died when he was 7. James went on to go to school for only 2 years because he had to leave when he was 9 to help his family survive financially. And then also at the age of 9, he is there at the very moment that the Declaration of Independence is read for the very first time in public. And he witnesses this event and he's inspired by this ideal of all people being equal. And this is the ideal that propels him to join the American Revolution at the age of 14 as a patriot privateer. And then the rest of his life is just like major moment after that. He's a prisoner of war. And then once he's freed, he walks home most of the journey with no shoes on to go from Brooklyn to Philadelphia and so forth. And so I read all of this about his life and how he worked as an abolitionist and ran a business as a master sailmaker and became one of the wealthiest people in Philadelphia, of black or white. And I think, why doesn't everyone know about this story? And why didn't I learn about it? A couple of years later, I decided to go back to graduate school. And you can see the second picture there and become to write books for children. And while I'm there, I learn more and more about the craft of writing picture books, particularly biographies. And it was during these workshops that I was inspired and encouraged to begin writing the story about James. So, as I'm writing about James and I'm thinking about, is this really a picture book or should I write something longer? I think about my youngest son, who was at the time a fourth grader. And that inspires me to begin the process of really investing in creating it as a picture book. Because I wanted children as young as my son to have a book that was accessible and inspiring about someone as extraordinary as James Forten, who really did live a life that exemplified the ideals of liberty and equality for all people. And then once I decided that I wanted to write a picture book, then I really began the research process in earnest. So as I researched on this project, I took many different approaches. One of them was to do walking tours through the streets of Philadelphia. I really wanted to walk the streets and to see what James would have seen as much as was possible. And the great thing about Philadelphia is that there are many opportunities to see some very old buildings and I was able to see this Pennsylvania State House. I was able to, if you could look here at this top picture on the film strip, I actually visited the spot where James's home used to be on Lombard Street, which was fascinating to be able to walk there and imagine what his house might have looked like. I also took a walking tour of Philadelphia. It was an African American history walking tour where we had a tour guide who actually gave us an oral history of prominent Philadelphians. And one of those was James Forten and his entire community. It was really fascinating to learn about the entrepreneurship that existed in old Philadelphia at that time. In addition to that, I visited the Museum of the American Revolution, and you can see there's a picture of my husband who was my research assistant on my walking tours. But the American History Museum had a wonderful exhibit called Black Founders, and there you can see a picture of James Forten, the famous profile picture of him. The exhibit featured the entire Forten family, and there was a wealth of information about his community and their involvement in not only abolition, but also civil rights causes and the suffragette movement as well. I also visited the Independent Seaport Museum. And you can see a picture there in the middle where there is canvas cloth as well as tools that James Forten, the sail maker, would have used. And all of these components really helped me to think about the time and place and that James Forten lived in. It really helped the historical time frame come alive as I thought about crafting the scenes in the book. On this next slide, you can see some of the other research materials that went into making the book as well. There were several books that talked about not only James Forten, but also what it was like to be a sailor, which is the Black Jacks book. And then there were two other books that I used for research as well that helped to talk about the Philadelphia community at the time and but particularly African American Philadelphians during that period. Philadelphia was a prominent community with the largest population of free Black Americans of the pre-Civil War era, and they played a huge role in abolition. I was also able to find many primary sources as well, which was absolutely thrilling to see writings in James Forten's penmanship. I think I got goosebumps the first time I looked at one of his letters. He is most well known for his letters from a man of color, which is a collection of five pamphlets that he wrote in 1813. And these pamphlets were used to protest anti-immigration bills that were designed to prevent free people of color to enter the state and would require free blacks who already lived there to carry registration papers. James Forten argued against that bill and was instrumental in helping to stop the discrimination of blacks and from free black people from being turned away from the state. And this was an example of his activism, an example of his leadership in the community. And finally, in addition to the research that I did and the walking tours and the museums, I also really thought a lot about the themes that came across in his life. And this last slide is about those themes that I hope readers come away with. One of the most important, I think, is considering the place and importance of historical memory, remembering that the voices of many people have been marginalized or minimized. Um, and thinking about how we honor those voices and the legacy of people who have made our country a better place, and remembering that there are voices that have not been heard. Another ideal that I hope people come away from is the importance of patriotism and what that really means and looks like. James believed in the American ideals of equality and freedom, and he wanted this for all people. And for him, that was patriotism, demanding that the country live up to the ideals that is set upon at its inception was really important to him. And he lived his life fighting for that. And the activism that he lived also was very important. And I hope that young readers come across understanding that freedom requires ongoing effort. And James Forten also lived this ideal. One of the ways that he was an activist was by funding the Liberator newspaper, um, allowing his home to be used as a part of the Underground Railroad, and making sure that not only did he fight for the cause of abolition, but he also mentored others to become abolitionists as well. Another theme that I hope people come across with is the importance of entrepreneurship and the responsibility of stewarding the entrepreneurship to help uplift others. James Forten lived this out as well in his business. As a master sailmaker, he hired people based on their talents. His workforce was one of the most integrated of his time in the 1800s. And he used his fortune to fund abolitionist causes. And finally, I hope that people come across with the ideal of legacy and the importance of that. James Forten lived a life that was meaningful and inspirational for all people. And he used his wealth to help people, not just as an abolitionist and an activist, but also he understood that not everyone had his financial blessings. And so he used his wealth to help uplift people who were living in poverty as well. Upon his death, over 3,000 mourners, black and white, attended his funeral. And they lined the streets to say goodbye to a man who, by all accounts, was not only kind and fair, but also an inspiration to all who knew him. So I hope that readers come across with a deep sense of who James Forten was, but also the importance of the lessons that his life can teach us.